Okay, Backlash, keep your cool. All you have to do is explain to the mayor your situation, and ask if you can borrow some sort of transportation to get back to Manhattan. Easy as pie. I mean, why should I be afraid of being alone? No pony has ever been able to out-negotiate me. Well, do draws count? Because if they do, then Lily always beat me. Besides, how good could the mayor of a backwater mining town be? Are you a gambling stallion, Mr. Lash? Doc Lodge called back as we hobbled towards the front porch of the mayor's cabin. It's just Backlash, and only when I can afford it, I replied cautiously. Why do you ask? 20 Caps says that before the end of tonight, you'll willingly want to help us. He was rather sure of himself as he stopped. I let what he suggested bounce around in my head for a moment. He wasn't feigning confidence. He definitely was stating it as more of an honest fact than anything. But that didn't mean I had to trust that he wouldn't cheat. You already know that I don't have anything to pay you with. Why make a bet if you know I can't pay it? I stopped in front of the porch, staring down at the single 6-inch rise to it. This was going to suck. Oh, let me worry about how you'll pay me. He waved a hoof in dismissal, letting a hint of malevolence through. I slowly put one hoof up to the porch, mentally preparing myself for the pain that would hit. Aren't you interested at all at what you might win? Not exactly. I groaned as I strained to pull myself onto the creaky wooden deck. That actually wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I panted lightly as I looked over to the doctor, watching as he seemed to be studying me, seeing how I reacted to things. It was actually getting to be really creepy. To be honest, as much as I'd like to stay and help, I need to get back to Manhattan. Dr. Lodge's magic opened the door, and he hopped up and limped inside ahead of me. I followed in, making sure to keep from knocking Brass's head against the wall, because I'm more courteous than Sherbert's Rangers ever will be. I looked across the cabin to the deck and sat at the left of the door. A very odd-looking ghoul sat in a chair behind it. I say very odd-looking, because his body was oddly shaped for a pony, and his muzzle was a light tan that transitioned to brown just past his frowning lips. One of his light blue eyes had turned milky white somewhere in his life, and his ears were just nubs, not to mention he had lost his entire mane. The one feature that stood out, though, was his frown. It hung so low on his muzzle that I half wasn't sure if it was actually a frown, or that if his muzzle was just slowly rotting off. So tell me, kid, why are you in my town? He spoke as if this was a common conversation, as if he just needed to go through the motions to reach some conclusion. You lost? Unemployed? Maybe just? He stopped as he looked over at me, glaring down at my pip-buck. His expression changed from one of boredom to one of seething hatred. Where did you get that? My pip-buck? I'm the current head of the Ministry of Morale. I tried to respond with authority, watching as that only seemed to make him quake in anger. Lodge! Detain him! He belted out as he slammed his chair back. I turned just in time to see Doc's horn pressed to my forehead softly. As soon as I realized what he was doing, I had lost feeling in all my legs, and flopped over to the floor. With the paralysis spell numbing me, I could barely move my eyes, let alone blink them. I really hoped that I didn't crush Brass under me when I fell, but I heard him moan next to me as he started to wake up. Hit his monster pal with it as well. The ghoul calmly spoke, Lodge stepping over me and did as he was told. You kids just rest on the ground for a while good ol' Pariah here tells you a little story. He spoke as he walked back behind the desk. I had a bad feeling that I had just stumbled upon yet another wastelander who had his own agenda. How the hell do I keep getting into these situations? Oh, that's right. Skyline isn't around to keep me from being a dumb pony. Well, that hasn't stopped me the last few times. The telltale metallic click of a lighter flipped open drew my attention. Lodge stepped back over to the door and looked over to where Pariah was lighting up a cigar. The ghoul nodded softly to Lodge, watching as the doctor, who had just saved my life, left me on the floor of this strange cabin. Pariah took a few long draws of the old-world luxury before shutting his lighter, sitting down in his chair as I head the front door latch. "Do you know why I detained you?" Pariah started out, his internal rage seeming to quell as he smoked. "My father was a good friend of the mayor who founded the ministry you claim to belong to. He and my mother would constantly tell me that they owed everything to her for what she had done for them. But when I was young, I got to meet Aunt Pinkie Pie for myself." He tensed up when remembering her, anger flushing across his face momentarily. "She was always so happy and cheerful, and she always wanted to play games or pull pranks. And for a time, I was happy. But like eventually everything does, things changed. The war happened, and Auntie was off to run the ministry she'd been handed, without little more than a goodbye to her so-called friends." He took a long drag off his cigar, helping him relax again as he leaned back. "Father had sent me here, to Red Wing, telling me of how I needed to do my best to help Equestria. And once again, for a time, I did just that. I worked hard, rose through the ranks, and was generally seen as the up-and-comer to look out for." A scowl grew across Pariah's face as he leaned forward. "But then the zebras started losing, and looked to hire out any race they could, buying off griffins, dragons, and even the sea serpents to attack Equestria from every corner. Admittedly, I should have seen it coming, but our fair princess had deemed any non-pony resident of Equestria was suspect to collision with the damned stripes." Pariah gagged and coughed a few times, thumbing his hoof against his chest to clear his throat. I took the moment to think over what he had just said, the gears in my head turning and throwing out what I should have seen. Pariah wasn't a pony at all. Almost overnight, the friends I'd made at the mine turned on me, calling for the MOM to take us away. Those foals didn't seem to understand that the donkey folk have always been equestrians. He took another puff from his now half-finished cigar, savoring the flavor before blowing a ring across the room above me. "So, I was lumped in with a couple of zebras who worked with us, and carted off to Manhattan for interrogation. There, they were sorted by non-pony race and strapped into seats. They spent hours having us recount our life stories, and the ones that they didn't think checked out, they interrogated via memory viewing and alteration spells." I could see the anger welling up inside of him again, growing bit by bit, while the cigar no longer did enough to help. I thought I was one of the unlucky ones, saying that they believed me. But when they were done, they didn't take me back to the mine. They took me home. He scoffed and shoved a set of papers off his desk. Using all the stories I had recounted of my father's journey across Equestria, they deemed it necessary to interrogate him as well. Do you know what it's like when you're forced to stand and watch as your actions get your family arrested? He growled and dropped his cigar on the table, slamming his hoof down on top of it in anger. When they brought him back, he didn't even remember who I was. He couldn't even remember who his wife was. Pariah reared up and kicked his desk, nearly flipping it over. "That ministry destroyed my father. They destroyed my family. On top of that, our pink friend did nothing to stop it." He stomped up to me and placed his hoof on my neck, pressing down on where the still hot embers of a cigar burned onto me, that I could tell or feel it through the spell holding me. That is quite enough. An exotic-sounding voice chimed up from behind me. Wait, somebody else had been watching all this along? I let out a long whimper as Pariah kept constant pressure. He cannot open the door if he is not in good enough health to do so. The only reason you're still here, Zin, is because of me. Pariah shot back to what I could only have guessed was a zebra, as they were the only ones I knew of to take odd names like that. After a moment of long silence, I watched the rotting hoof draw off of me. You want him uninjured. Then you must volunteer to babysit. I'll have Lodge inform Miss Fury that she is now temporarily mine overseer. What of the other one? Zin inquired, curiously, stepping closer to me. Please, goddesses, if you can hear me, I need you to keep Brass safe. I don't know how, but I will find a way to get us out of this place, and make it up to you. I just need you to keep him safe. I swear that I'll be a damned saint if you get us out of here. Every minute we waste is another that Sherbert has to find more mega spells anyway. And that wouldn't be good for any pony. Just fucking kill him. Pariah snarled, pushing his desk back into its upright position. No, I can't let this happen. I desperately tried to get my legs to move, but as hard as I tried to flail, they refused to budge at all. My ears perked with movement as Zin took a step forward. If I may be so bold, sir, why waste a perfectly good pony when you can put him to work? Zin spoke with what my mind now interpreted as the voice of an angel. Luna, I know I've been asking you for a lot recently, but please let him agree. Fine, just get them out of here. He snorted and sat down on his chair, putting my mind to rest for a moment. Speaking of, my mind struggled to find the answer to the realization that if Zin was a zebra, how was she supposed to take us anywhere? Brass, she might be able to hoof up on her back, but I'm not exactly a lightweight. Oh, and put them both in the cage. Fury will be by to pick them up in the morning. As you wish. Zin spoke, stepping up right behind me. I watched my vision twist and rise up as she used her hoof to sling me over her shoulder. I was now staring down at the floor as my limp hooves dangled in front of me, feeling all kinds of awkward as she was standing on her hind legs only. She turned and leaned forward to grab Brass before standing back up. Part of me wondered if Sats would be used to guide hoof-based attacks, or maybe at least get my hooves to move through the paralysis. The hope was figuring anything out was crushed as the gears in my head threw out the reminder that I had to use my muscles to activate Sats in the first place. Zin walked over to the door and used one of her legs to kick it open, amazingly able to balance on a single hoof. I think I'm beginning to understand why Carlotta didn't like zebras so much. They were fucking weird. We left the cabin and stepped out in the darkness of night. I could barely see the ground under Zin's hooves as we were hauled further up the mountainside. The sound of gravel crunching under hoof was my only companion. So, I'm stuck. But at least I'm not stuck alone. I wish I could tell Brass how glad I was that he'd been here, but I don't think anything I say could even come close to expressing it. He keeps trying to ask, so maybe I should try to repay him with a date, even if I would never really date somebody his age. I think he's at least earned it. After a few minutes of being silently taken up the trail, I started to wonder just how far we were going to go. The constant swaying of Zin as she walked was starting to make me tired, and my eyelids were getting harder to keep open. I couldn't fall asleep yet, though. I needed every bit of information my surroundings could give me when I got to wherever it was I was being taken to. My mind perked up slightly as some of the gravel started to reflect a bit of orange light. The light grew brighter with each step. The annoyingly unnatural orange glow of the fluorescent light ahead, soon accompanied by the silent buzz sound that they were known to give off. We stopped moving as Zin leaned over one side, balancing on a single hoof again to kick open a wooden something. She leaned back onto both hooves. I swung across her and caught a blurred glimpse of her glyph mark, even if it was only a flash. The weird shape almost bending right in with her stripes. I don't know why, but my mind thought that it was important enough to try and figure out. I was about to rock into view of it again, but instead found myself tumbling. My mind felt, for a brief moment, like I was going to fall into the Delamere again, panicking about swimming with my body paralyzed. Of course, it was completely idiotic, because I slammed into the dirt floor with a heavy plop. My head had landed oddly, and bounced to where I was stuck, looking into the far corner of the cell. The dry bones of a long-dead previous occupant sat propped up in the corner. My view was obstructed when Brass was carefully set down next to me, a soft snoring coming from his muzzle as he lay in the dirt. I felt both annoyed and grateful that she at least made sure to treat him with respect. But why was she doing all that? 2 times she had shown compassion for him, and 2 times I have had to feel grateful for it. Maybe that was something I could use to get out of here. I think it might actually work. Remembering back to one of the old Zebra stealth magazines that Skyline had brought me, the intention was to help me hide better, but it never helped because of my body shape. Don't ask me how I can be overweight in the wasteland. I'm just gifted like that, I guess. It had an article that read that should you be captured, you should have to form a bond with your guard. Making sure yourself and other hostages seem like more than just bargaining chips could be a good way to break free of their will. But I couldn't shake this itchy feeling that Zin wasn't going to be that easy. Wait, I have an itch. Fuck! And of course, now that I've thought of it, it's getting worse. Celestia, if I could just have one more thing of you today,